And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast, where we are continuing to live in the 90s because 2020 sucks. And we are going to steal a Ringer idea, a Simmons Russillo idea. And so I wanted to bring on the one and only Ryen Russillo for a rewatch of Bulls. Bulls. I'm stealing your puns, Ryen Russillo. How are you?
I'm great. I wanted to do a Bill Russell one and call it the Rewatch of Bills, but then we thought maybe there'd be a bunch of Josh Allen fans downloading it and getting real pissed off. So
Josh Allen plays for the football team, the Buffalo Bills?
That's right. I forgot who I was on with. One-dimensional. Zach Lowe is the Carmelo Anthony of sports people.
Wow. Wow.
Which can be really great in your peak.
I'd like to think I'm a five-tool player within one thing. So I don't know what that makes. Within one sport, I'm a five-tool player, but that makes me like a one-tool player in general sports media. That makes me, I guess, Carmelo. Hey, man, Carmelo's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'll take it. So I've always been fascinated by this game. I wrote a whole giant column revisiting it, interviewing as many people as I could. And the game is the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, Indiana Pacers, Chicago Bulls. This is the Last Dance season, so we might as well do a Last Dance game. And I was always fascinated with this game because I remember even at the time, and we're about the same age, Michael and the Bulls it seemed impossible that they could ever lose. Ever. Down 2-0 against the Knicks in 1993 without home court advantage, it still seemed impossible that they would lose. This is the only time that I can remember feeling, oh my God, they might actually lose. So I hadn't watched the game in 22 years. I'd always wanted to go back and watch it. And when I heard this documentary was going to be accelerated due to the crappy life that we now all have to lead, I was super excited to revisit it, to get an excuse to revisit it. So I will open with this. Do you remember watching it in real time? And having rewatched it now 22 years later, what was the thing that surprised you most, that your memory had either tricked you into forgetting or that you had remembered one way but happened the other way?
Okay, I do remember where I was. I mean, I remember where I was for almost every one of these games because I was still up in Vermont, and it was mandatory. I mean, especially for guys like us that love the NBA and grew up with it, but it was just mandatory. You were going to watch everything with Jordan because the whole year was, is he done? Which still seems impossible that that's exactly what happened when you watch this documentary. But I don't know that there was a lot that tricked me, but watching it again to see how absolutely dominated a team could be on the offensive glass is the entire story of this game. The offensive rebounding rate for the Bulls is over 40%. I think at one point, I mean, really before the game is decided, it's 22 offensive rebounds for Chicago, 3 for the Pacers. It's 21 second chance points to 1 for Indiana with like a minute or so left to go in this game. And yet the Pacers are still in it. The fact that it's even close because Chicago doesn't shoot it that well. Both teams are a mess from the free throw line. But for it to be a Game 7, and Smits is terrible, but you have Dale Davis, you have Antonio Davis, who was one of my favorites back then, the Davis boys, as Isaiah Thomas calls them. You had all these big frontline guys, and yet Chicago's front line destroys you on the glass. That's the game.
Yeah, so I interviewed everybody that I could from this game. I couldn't get Phil, I couldn't get Michael, Scotty, Dennis, the guys who are not doing interviews I couldn't get. The person who sounded the saddest, like the sorrow in his voice was coming through the phone, was Rick Smits, who told me that he watched the game for the first time in 22 years in preparation for our interview. And then when we did the interview, still was like, yeah, I don't really remember that jump ball. I don't really remember that, like, box out I didn't get. Like, I just put it all behind. It was like the sadness was coming through. Because I think he probably knows on some level there's 3 rebounds in that game that if I get or if I prevent my guy from getting around me and tipping, we're going to the finals.
Yeah, and Smits had come off a really big Game 6. And even though he ends up at 13, but I mean, we're talking 30 minutes from Rick Smits, and he has 4 rebounds. Even Antonio Davis, I mean, 10 for him, that's what you'd expect in 20 minutes. His rebounded rate was really good. But there's all of these moments, especially when Pippen puts him up 4. And I don't know how you want to do it. I mean, it's your podcast, so I don't want to get too far ahead as I close.
We're just going to riff. Just
right.
Go.
So they're up 2. Pippen has an incredible drive, which is the 6th foul on Antonio Davis to make it 83, and it's an and one. So he goes to the line for the free throw attempt. The game is still very much in the balance. A little under, I think, 2 minutes at this point, and he misses it. And guess who ends up with the rebound? It's Jordan. Like, Jordan dives in. There's so many bad free throw box outs by the Pacers in this game, which is unacceptable. Like, you do that in a high school game, you're going to get yanked. And they do it like 3 or 4 times in this game. It's like, what are you guys doing on these free throw box outs? And then, of course, Jordan on top. I mean, he's in there with the trees, and guess what? He just comes out, they reset it, and they missed the 3, but the time that the Pacers lost off of that was as big as a made shot.
So let's just zero in on that play, because Pippen there's about 2 minutes left in the game. Pippen and Dennis Rodman run a 2-man game, and Antonio Davis and Reggie Miller kind of bump into each other. It's unclear if they want to switch or if they don't want to switch. They bump into each other, and Pippen gets this little sliver of daylight and hits this jump hook on the baseline over some contact from Antonio Davis that fouls Antonio Davis out. And by the way, that jump hook is a very Pippen shot. Like, Pippen actually worked a lot on that shot. I was talking about Jim Clemens and Bill Cartwright. I talked to both of them. They were both talking about how, like, Pippen came into the league with, like, nothing on offense. Just athleticism and dunking and, like, no moves, no shots, no go-to sort of, like, crafty moves. And that jump hook became, for whatever reason, one of his comfort shots. So he makes it. It's an and one. And he misses the free throw. And you called it. Smits is the low man for Indiana on the left block, and Jordan is behind him. There's I don't know, I'm not going to do the math, 8-inch height differential, something, maybe more, 10 inches, I think Smits is listed at 7'4". And Jordan just trucks Rick Smits, just trucks him, shoves him under the backboard, rebound goes up, Jordan has to jump kind of up and across the paint where Dale Davis is, and he goes up in between those two guys, gets a rebound that allows the Bulls to kill 24 seconds. It's honestly like, when I saw that play, I had no memory of it. I was like, holy shit. That is as incredible a clutch rebound as really you will see from a guard or a wing maybe ever. It's one of the great forgotten plays of Jordan's career.
It is one of those, we're like, wait, who? Oh, Jordan has it. And then he goes to reset it, because the Pacers, to their credit, like what I love about some of these great teams, and I'm not even talking about teams that win titles or anything, even though the 04 Pistons thing, it's always one of my favorite things, like how switchable they were on defense. And you had some of these Pacers. I mean, if you could keep Mark Jackson or Chris Mullen out of it, and Mullen at this point, like, he had a nice little stretch of the third quarter, but he didn't give him a lot. He didn't give him a lot in the series, even though I was always rooting for him because of my fandom going back to St. John's with Mullen. But they had guys that they were doing a good job defensively. I mean, Kukoc has that insane third quarter where he doesn't miss, and a lot of it is like weak side skip passes over to him, and Kukoc has this great run that actually puts the Bulls in a position to have a lead after this terrible start, because the Pacers come out 8 of 8 in the entire game. So there's a lot of defensive stuff there where if you're the Pacers, you actually felt good about. Like, this isn't easy. It's not like Jordan. When I watch this Phoenix series, I go, my God, like, Dumas is a turnstile. And then Marley, no one's going to stay in front of MJ. But there are moments through these great playoff runs for Jordan where you're like, actually, like, the Knicks don't have a really big wing to defend him. Phoenix has a problem here. Byron Scott's not enough in 91. Like, I've gone back and watched all these things. The Pacers should feel like if they were to go back, if there was another game after this, they'd watch some of the tape going, hey, he didn't kill us in this game like he kills other guys, but to have, I'm sure, Bird and Carlisle and those old school guys, to see a team not be able to box out in those moments, which you just would think too on paper, like, how does this team not box out? And they got beat up. There was a moment, Zach, in the first half where Jordan's at the free throw line and it's 2 guys from Chicago even lined up. So you've got the 2 guys on the lower block from the Pacers, 2 guys from Chicago, and then a third on one of the sides to the right side, right block, and they pinch down to box out, and then, the other Pacer has a one-on-one box out, and Travis Best doesn't do anything, and Jordan just walks off the miss, grabs it, and they have another possession. Like, no one even accounts for the shooter.
So Jordan finishes the game 9 of 25 from the floor. 9 field goals made. Now he makes 10 free throws, doesn't shoot it particularly well, 10 of 15. So 9 field goals made. 4 of them are putbacks. 4. 3 of those are putbacks of his own shots, including that free throw. So you hold Michael to 5 field goals, like kind of in the run of play, in the run of normal play, and he gets 4. I wonder how many times in his entire career Michael Jordan had 4 putbacks, or at least in the last three titles. It's just like, you look at these, and it's funny. So you talk about the free throw putback of his own free throw. I just had Danny Ainge on my podcast today. I forgot to ask him this. I was watching some of the Portland-Chicago finals from 92, and there's one instance where I think Pippin's at the line, and Jordan is back around midcourt, between like midcourt and the three-point arc. He's the bull that's not in the offensive rebounding position. And Ainge and Terry Porter are so paranoid about Jordan sprinting in from almost half court to rebound a free throw that they're both like patrolling him and boxing him out. And like Jordan takes one slide over to the left, and Ainge is like pointing at Porter, like, go get him, go over there. They're like panicked about Michael Jordan doing, like the sprint in offensive rebound. And here he is just,
right.
So 4 putbacks in one game for Michael Jordan. And I have to tell you, I was more interested to interview the Pacers players than the Bulls, because the team that almost beat the Bulls but lost is a more interesting story to me than the team that always won. And I don't think it's not an exaggeration at all to say, like, to varying degrees, they are all heartbroken about that game still. Some, like Smiths, have put it behind them. Some, like Travis Best, who was really important in this series, can tell you from memory, having not seen the game, with like astonishing accuracy, some of like the punch in the gut plays that happened, including the last foul he committed when Larry then yanks him out of the game for Mark Jackson. And you watch the tape and you're like, this guy remembers it like the pain is so fresh for them 22 years later.
Wow. Yeah, they should feel that way. I mean, they should, because even if they were just to marginally lose the rebounding or the second chance points, they're going to the NBA Finals. But the Pacers come out, like you mentioned, 8-8. Jordan starts 1 of 5 for the game. All of a sudden, you're looking at it going, wait, I mean, the Pacers are up 13 points in the first quarter. Like, what the hell's going on here? And then Jordan picks it up in that second. And then I felt like the Pacers kind of lost. Like, look, everything was going in. Mark Jackson's pulling up. Reggie Miller's hitting his threes. And Reggie, for a score in comparison to the wing scores, whether we have them now or back then, I mean, he was still somebody that was a little bit more dependent on the setup than somebody was going to create. Kind of almost like early Clay. Like, I think Clay now can dribble into his stuff, but I thought early Clay needed somebody to help him get free a little bit more. And I think, look, Reggie probably could have dribbled more than I'm giving him credit for, but the way they ran what they did, because they ran him through a maze of picks, it wasn't like he was just going to get the ball and clear people out and say, all right, I got this, and try to take somebody off the dribble the whole time. That's not really what he was, which actually makes him a great team scorer. But there are moments where even Travis Best, and I do have a funny Travis Best story if you want that a little bit later, but he gets a little ball happy where he's taking some tough shots. Mark Jackson has moments where Pippin's picking up a full court, trying to turn him, and Mark Jackson's built to be picked up full court because he's going to back you down the whole time, but it's still exhausting. And then Pippen gets subbed out at one stretch, and then guess who's defending you now that Pippin's gone? Jordan. And they
Harper, it might be Harper. There's no break with those three guys.
And Harper has a huge defensive play late, but Harper also has a moment where he's chasing Miller around because I don't think they want to put Jordan on him the whole time. And, as you're watching the ebbs and flows of any of these games, the Pacers have long stretches too, despite this being close, where, okay, the Bulls are missing some shots. MJ's going to get these. The Pacers have some stuff where their balance almost worked against them, Zach. I don't know if you see it the same way, agree, disagree, but their balance almost worked against him where it was kind of like, hey, who's going to get us out of this rut? Because they go from being up double digits to like a 20-5 run, which I think may have actually been a little bit worse than even 20-5.
Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action has acquired the secret to building a thicker, greener lawn. In return, they have taken all of the hard work out of the picture, that's good, to give you more time to do nothing extra. People don't realize that it's easy to get the lawn of their dreams by simply feeding their lawn a few times throughout the year. Scott's Turf Builder Action kills weeds, prevents crabgrass, yucca, and feeds to build thick, green lawns. With Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action, you can finally get the lawn you've always dreamt of. Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action will give your yard the nourishment it needs to help your weak, thin lawn recover. Who wants a weak, thin lawn? When you feed with Scott's Turf Builder Triple Action multiple times throughout the year, your grass will be greener, stronger, more resilient. Pick up a bag today. This is a Scott's yard. Also, Scott's no quibble money back guarantee states if you're not satisfied, you can get your money back. That's good. This is a Scott's yard. So if you ask both the Pacers and the Bulls, at least the players I interviewed, which did not include Michael would surely give a different answer. But if you ask the Pacers and the Bulls, what is the single biggest reason Chicago won this series? I think a majority of them, if not almost all of them, would say Scottie Pippen's defense on Mark Jackson. Phil Jackson in Game 1 decides we're putting Pippen on Jackson because half of their offense is Mark Jackson and his big ass backing little point guards down onto the block and setting everything up. We're going to put this 6'7" monster on him that's A, going to pick him up full court, B, he can't back him down because Scotty's too strong. And Mark Jackson has, I think, 14 turnovers or something egregious in the first 2 games combined in Chicago.
And he starts to get benched, actually. Like, they start closing with Best a little bit.
With Best. Right. And not only that, you talked to Antonio Davis was an amazing interview. He took me through a lot of the X's and O's in this series.
Davis is one of my favorite human beings I've ever met. So,
and he was like, Zach, if you watch it, not only is Pippen just like, you can tell he's smothering Mark Jackson, but one of the things he's doing is they knew where Reggie Miller liked to come off picks. They knew what side he liked. They knew the timing, and they would shade Mark away from those spots so that when Reggie would pop over there, he had no way, like Mark was on the other side of the court or Mark had no passing lane to him. Like Scotty took Mark Jackson out of the series, and that's the biggest reason they won.
When Isaiah mentions that, because it's a 3-man booth, it's Costas on the call, and then he's got Doug Collins and then Isaiah. And Isaiah mentions that. He goes, you can see like Pippen constantly is looking back as he's picking Mark up full court. He's looking back because he's trying to turn Jackson away from the curl off the screen that you're talking about. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like, and then I was looking for it. And it was funny too, because in a 3-man, and this isn't really anybody's fault, but it'll happen. I mean, hell, I used to do it sometimes on the radio show where if I wasn't really paying attention, I was thinking about the next thing I would do. I would double up on the other guy's question, and then once they do it a listening session and you get humiliated in front of 8 people, you either stop doing it or you continue to be embarrassed because it becomes a bit. But Doug Collins goes, oh, look at what Pippen's doing. He's turning Mark Jackson away from the middle. And Isaiah had just said it like 3 plays earlier. And it's not like Doug wasn't. It's just so many things are going on. It's Game 7. You know, you're trying to pick out all these things. But that's just one of those things that, you know, I wish I noticed immediately. I don't know if that's easier to notice it when you're in the building, but it's a real subtlety because this would have to be, if Mark Jackson has like a few nightmares, this would be up there where it's just, and like you said, like, imagine how much worse it would be for another point guard that hasn't made a living with the backup dribble. You know, that magic stuff.
Yeah. Two things. Number one, I think it was Antonio Davis that told me, Zach, if you look at our team, like, we didn't really have a plan B because we didn't have another ball handler in our starting lineup. Mark Jackson was our only ball handler. Like, to your point, Reggie is not like a pick and roll guy. Malone was like almost washed by that time. And then it's big guys. Like, when they took Mark's off the post up / off the dribble game away from us, like all we could really do was try to post up Rick Smits and the Davis boys, and like we didn't really have anything else to do unless Reggie got free. The second thing is to your point about Mark Jackson tragedy, basketball tragedy. He told me he and Chris Mullen were texting like a week before I interviewed them because this game was on, I don't know, some ESPN Classic or something was running this game, maybe NBA TV, and like the day before, another channel had run St. John's Georgetown in the Final Four where Georgetown beat St. John's. I think, did they play in the Final Four? It's like the worst St. John's loss and the worst Pacers
did.
Loss.
It was this insane year where you had 3 teams in the Big East in the Final Four. It was the Nova Georgetown game. But St. John's, the only team St. John's in the country, the only team in the country they couldn't beat was Georgetown. And then they ended
Mullen
up on their
side. So Mullen and
Jackson
Jackson are like back-to-back nights on TV. Why are we cursed like this? Do we have to watch our 2 most painful moments on back-to-back nights on national TV? So I'll tell you what I had forgotten about the game. 22 years out, my memory of the game, the general arc of the game was Pacers lead the whole game. Michael gets to the foul line a million times in the fourth quarter and the Bulls come back and win. That's what I thought. Okay. So when I went and rewatched the game, Pacers get out to an early lead. I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I remember. Like, Pacers come out, just punch him in the mouth. Dale Davis is going at Kukoc, and they're playing bully ball. Like, okay, this is the game I remember. The Bulls roar back in the second quarter, take like a 6 or 7 point lead, then take like an 8 point lead, 69-61 in the third quarter. The Bulls are up, and like, You and I have seen that game a million times. Road underdog comes out, throws the first punch, feeling themselves a little bit. Home favorite comes back, takes the lead, crowd's going crazy. And, like, that's just kind of the game. Like, it peters out from there. The road team never recovers. Home team wins by 10, 11. For the Pacers to come back from 69-61 down in the third quarter and take the lead in the fourth quarter, that, in retrospect, was so impressive to me because, like, that does not happen in most of these games. In most of these games, the Bulls just, or the home team just kind of walk away with it. That is not what I remember. The Pacers falling behind by that amount and coming back to take the lead, and they do it just with gritty defense. Jalen Rose makes a couple plays. Travis Best makes a couple plays. That's really, really impressive and really unusual. And you could tell it freaked the home crowd out. Like, wait a second, this is not what's supposed to happen.
No, it's a good point because that place, was almost spoiled. There's some of the playoff games where I watch, like the Orlando games, maybe it was 96 and they still weren't really used to the whole deal with MJ coming back, or 95, excuse me.
95.
And I'm like, wait a minute, why is this place like a little distilled? But that was not the case because this place is on fire. The Jalen, if you wanted to do the second guess thing, Jalen Rose only playing 15 minutes. That's a mistake, but Jalen was still a misunderstood player at this point of his career. Like, people didn't really know what to do with him. He's on another team already. He plays 15 minutes. He has a great stretch where he hits a nice runner. He's got a great read off of a high screen. And I don't know what the deal is with him. I feel like Jalen's the type of guy that maybe fits into today's NBA better, a prime Jalen, where you just kind of let him create, especially at that size, and be able to shoot it a little bit more. Because they got the Pippen part of it. Like, as you mentioned, they needed that other ball handler. They should have figured out a way to get the ball out of Mark's hands so they had more seconds in their own shot clock possession to be able to run longer screens or some sort of second action. And instead it takes so long to even get set up because of what's happening because they're relying on just the one ball handler. Like, they spread it out. It's different than some of the other 90s stuff where it's packed. Like, there are little glimpses that I'll see later in the 90s being like, oh, wait a minute, that actually looks a little bit more familiar. Where there's stuff in 93 where I go, this doesn't even look like the same sport. They would go 4 out sometimes and have Mark work at the top. But if Mark Jackson is just getting into the possession at 12 seconds left in the shot clock, that limits what you can actually run because it's taken so long for you to actually just get the thing going. And I think looking back at this, I'm not a huge second guess every coach sucks guy. That's just not the way I roll with this stuff. I think coaches are just beat up on way too much. But Jalen would have been a nice outlet to at least create something, if not for someone else on his own.
Well, the Pacers were like so slow and old school, and like Jalen would come in and be like, whoa, what is this dose of modernity coming into this game? This like wiry wing doing cool stuff. So here's the Jalen story. Larry Bird, who's the coach of the Pacers, obviously takes Jalen out like midway through the fourth quarter. I think the Pacers might have even been ahead when he took him out.
Yeah, they went on a run there. Like you said, You're right. Like, that run is really impressive out of this group.
Jalen never comes back into the game.
No.
And he's pissed. He told me, like, I was pissed. So they go to the locker room. Pacers are digesting the loss in the locker room. Several players are crying. Mark Jackson is going from player to player, being like, we got a lot to be proud of. It's a great season. Larry comes in, kicks everyone who's not on the team out. I don't know who was in there, media, hangers on, whatever, kicks everyone out. Gives a speech where some of the players remember his voice wavering a little bit, like, whoa, we've never seen Larry kind of emotional. It's like thanking the players and, expressing disappointment that in himself that they had lost. And Jalen told me, he was like, I just wanted to get the hell out of there. I was so mad. Media didn't want to talk to me because I was just I was a kid. I was a bench guy. Showered, dressed. I wanted to be the first one on the bus. I didn't want to see Larry. I didn't want to deal with Larry. I was just freaking mad at Larry. So he sprints out, blah, 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 gets on the bus. There's one person on the bus sitting in the front row by himself, silently sulking, and it's Larry Bird. Larry got out of there faster than everybody else and just wanted to sit on the bus by himself. Larry decided not to talk to me for the story, so I only got Jalen's version of this. And Jalen sees Larry and just wants to blow by him and go sit in the back of the bus. And Larry stops him and says something to him like, yeah, maybe I should have put you back in. I'm sorry. And Jalen was like, from that moment, Larry and I were cool forever. I love Larry. But apparently Larry felt similarly right after the game.
It's pretty glaring, and I know you're probably more like me, where I don't really love the, every result could be the opposite if the coach wasn't an idiot.
Right,
I don't really believe that is as applicable as whether it's fans or media to make it out to be. And I'm sure that actually leads to me missing sometimes. We're going, you know what? Just because you want to go against the coach sucks all the time. I didn't like to do that with the radio show. I still don't do it now. But in this game, they needed this isn't even basketballish, but it's just they needed another angle of attack instead of this straight line. Let's get it over half court. Let's see what we have, because, Smits isn't a great option, even though Rick Smits is a really good player, but do you really want Rick Smits catching 7 feet away and trying to work? Do you really want to post? Like, they were doing a thing in the very beginning of the game where Kukoc was on Dale Davis, and it was like, hey, Dale, just go eat.
Dale was so excited, too. Dale was like, I never get to do this. This is so awesome.
We're going to run low block Kukoc, and he works him bad a few times. Mark Jackson throws in a 3. So it goes from all these things that look like they can work to there's long stretches where none of it works, but I don't even know that I knew it at the time as much. But watching it today, you go, all right, Jalen has to play more than 15 minutes.
It is astonishing when you watch the game, like, how unwilling everyone in the game except for Steve Kerr and Reggie Miller is to shoot threes. Like, Ron Harper, who's a starting guard in the NBA in the conference finals, is like, wants no part of shooting a 3. Like, Mark Jackson, so Indiana's offense is like Mark Jackson entry pass to Rick Smits. They send a little help off Mark Jackson because Scotty doesn't respect him. Kick out to Mark Jackson, who in the interim has taken 3 steps inside the 3-point line. So if he decides to shoot, it's like a 19-footer. Like, these dudes, like, when Steve Kerr jacks a 3 in this game, it's legitimately alarming. Like, whoa, Steve, what are you doing? And it's like, no, that's actually just a good shot.
Yeah, the 3 stuff is like, this is the part of it. Also, shot difficulty. One of the things that I'm so blown away with now is it isn't just that everybody takes 3s. It's what's an acceptable 3-point attempt. And some of that Steph being able to make shots that we've just never seen before. And then it kind of becomes this thing around the league where it's like, well, if Steph's going to take that, then I'll take that. And, even Trae Young, where I could sit and debate about Trae Young all the time, like, his shot difficulty, his acceptable shot difficulty attempts is way beyond anyone back then, and you got to give it to Trae because a lot of those go in. You're like, all right, I guess this is a good shot for you. Clay, Kyrie has it. All the great players kind of have this. One of the only guys that I've seen from this era, because I don't think anybody was doing it in the early 90s, is that Reggie would do it. Reggie would come off a curl, hard catch, turn up and square and shoot. And there really weren't many guys doing it. Like, Reggie was very ahead of his time on kind of what was an acceptable shot that other guys would be getting benched for.
Now more than ever, we have to look out for each other and count on each other. Marathon wants you to know that you can count on them for high-quality, top-tier gas. Marathon gasolines are formulated with STP additives. They keep your vehicle running at peak performance by optimizing fuel economy, removing those ugly deposit buildups, and by reducing emissions. That's good. And right now, you can get 5 cents off every gallon every day with Make It Count rewards from Marathon. Plus, you can earn points for additional savings on fuel, airfare, hotels, and more. This is definitely a deal you can count on. It's quick and easy to join. Just download the free Make It Count app or go to makeitcount.com/radio and start saving today. This offer is valid only at participating Marathon stations. Remember, wherever you need to go, be safe. The people at Marathon are behind you all the way. Let's talk about Reggie Miller, because I'm not going to sit here. Like, I haven't put what I would consider an enormous amount of time into where does Reggie Miller rank among the all-time shooting guards. I mean, this is one game, but it's one of the biggest games, one of the 5 or 6 biggest games Reggie Miller played in his career. I mean, he was in a lot of conference finals. Obviously, we all know the insane clutch shots he's made, including in Game 4 of this series and Game 3 of this series, actually, too. Reggie was awesome. I don't know if people realize, to your point, like, the contested, on-the-move threes and, like, the breathing space that gave everyone else on the Pacers, because defenses were so scared of, like, even a contested Reggie Miller 3. And you look at his career from his second year, which is 1989. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 straight seasons in which he averages at least 16 points a game. In most of those, he's between like 19 and 23. Even in his last year when he's 39 years old, he averaged 15 points a game and shot, well, he didn't shoot well from three that year, but like he was incredibly consistent. And I actually think, I mean, obviously we know he's mentally tough because you don't make as many huge shots as that guy did without being mentally tough. I think he's physically tougher than people give him credit for because he's this skinny guy. He's kicking his legs out. He's drawing all these BS fouls. Like, he had to guard Jordan. The Pacers didn't really have anyone else to guard Jordan. Like, Derek McKee would come in and do it for 15 minutes. Mullen couldn't do it. Jackson couldn't do it. Their bigs weren't versatile enough to do it. And I'll tell you, man, like, Reggie fought his ass off. He needed help because it's Michael Jordan and he's bigger and stronger than Reggie. But, like, Reggie was not a pushover. Reggie made Michael earn every single good look he got in this series.
There's also moments, too, where in the very early 90s where you go, no one is selling a charge. There's very little selling of anything. And I loved it. And there's very little arguing. It's just like, oh my gosh, like, hey, I have a problem with this call. I'll address it as we transition, and yet I'll still pay attention to what's going on, as opposed to just stopping play in the middle of live action just so I can let you know that somebody reached in on me. I mean, you know, the stuff the guys do today is honestly so embarrassing, and it sucks, and I hate it, and it's never going to make me stop watching games, but it's a joke how bad it is today compared to what it was then. Like, if Jordan had a problem, even Jordan, who I kind of remembered as constantly talking to the refs, like, he was timely about it. He was even efficient with that, right? He was efficient in the way he would, like, look at you at halftime, he'd let you have it, but at that point, there was no actual game action. So, Reggie starts selling more. We know that part about him, but he also, to your point, like, even though he's skinnier than these guys, the screening is still really physical. You know, the stuff that they would let you do on these screens, like I've been saying now for a long time, and I don't know how much you've consumed of it, but I think the defense is physical, but people have turned physical defense into somehow tougher defense and that it's better defense.
Yes, I've heard you say it, yeah.
Right, and it isn't. I mean, to me, it's spacing, defending spacing versus not defending spacing, and just things are clogged and a little bit more physical. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily like just way better defense that guys today wouldn't be able to score back then. I just don't believe it. I think it's actually ridiculous to even argue. But Reggie's in the mix of all of these things. The problem is it gets back to the rebounding. I mean, he's 6'7", he had 0 rebounds in a game 7, and he probably, like in today's world, where would you have a 20-point score for his career, 40% from three for his career, and he's only taking 13 shots and 4 free throws? Like, it's not enough Reggie, too. Like, Reggie needs to be taking more of those shots.
Well, you have to credit the Bulls defense because, as you said, when you have to go through the gauntlet of Jordan, well, Harper starts on him because they want to spare Jordan as much as possible, so they put Jordan on Mullen. But if it's Harper and like Harper needs to come out, okay, we'll put MJ on you. Okay, MJ needs a little break, we'll put Pippen on you. It's like, Jesus, man, can I get like a little Randy Brown minutes or something? Can I get Steve Kerr on me for like
a switch?
A possession? Can I get Kukoc on a switch? Can I get something? Man, you look at Reggie's career. You know, he only made, I mean, only is relative. He only made 5 All-Star games. He's on the 96 Olympic team, I believe, that is sort of the pseudo dream team. 25,000 career points. And, you know, a lot of, I just went through the scoring averages, like a lot of kind of iconic moments. I mean, we all remember 8 points, 9 seconds. In this series, he hits that not buzzer beater, it's a 3 with 0.7 seconds left in game 4, where he freaking pushes off Michael, shoves Michael towards half court, curls around, gets open, hits a 3 with the Pacers down 1. So essentially a game-winning 3. I would like to actually go back when we have time, and I guess we have time now, and do like the shooting guards list, like where would he rank? Because I just think a lot of people would rank him behind like Manu Ginobili and some other guys that, like, I'm not sure. Reggie was awesome and tougher than people give him credit for on defense.
Yeah, because he's so active and he wanted to compete. You know, that's my number one thing with defensive players. Like, if you don't want to compete defensively in the playoffs, like I think there's something wrong with you. But throughout the regular season, that's who he was. But I never think of Reggie first. Like, whenever I think of these guys and the great, like, yes, he's a great player, but he's just below whatever that special tier is. He just is. And I don't think that's wrong. I actually think like Reggie is fairly or accurately listed. However, where is he? I don't want to put you in the spot here because did you vote on the top 74 list for ESPN.com?
I didn't. I don't know if he's even on it. because you look at some of the guys who are in the 50s, like Tracy McGrady's in the 50s, Pierce is in the 50s. I think you're checking right now. I can tell you're looking up something. I'm not sure Reggie's on it.
Well, if Vince Carter's on it, and he is, Reggie should be ahead of Vince Carter.
You think Reggie's ahead of Vince Carter?
If I were doing this, yes.
Interesting.
I don't know if Reggie's on there. I mean, I didn't memorize.
Like I haven't sat down and done enough like player for player because if you give it to me like that, just heads up like gut, I just think Vince's all around game is a little better than Reggie's because you just said 20 points, no rebounds, but like you look at Vince's numbers, Vince is not like the McGrady, Drexler level passer in terms of just assists. You just look at his assists. Like in your head, you probably think Vince is getting like 5 or 6 assists a game. He wasn't. He's like closer to Carmelo Anthony level of assists than he is to those other guys I just mentioned. So I haven't thought about it. My gut would say Vince, like peak Vince was a little better than peak Reggie. But Reggie had some moments, man. Reggie had some moments. Is he on it? Are you looking it up?
He's not on it. He's not on it. You're right. Vince is 55th. That is so high.
I think Reggie might be becoming underrated. I think it's possible.
For him to not be on this list, maybe you got 10 extra bonus spots if you're on the jump.
I'm just gonna leave that one there. But Reggie's a prominent broadcaster. I mean, Reggie is like Barkley. He's kept himself in the media ether. I don't know. I'd like to.
Wait a minute. So let me just back up for a second. Who would you rather have on your team for like the 10 best years of their career? See, actually, Vince might be the answer. Vince at 55 is too high. I'm sorry, but Vince doesn't have anything close to sniffing the playoff moments that Reggie has.
No, Reggie has. Part of it is the Pacers. The Pacers had a very weird run of like oscillation of playoff success and failure in there. So like they made the finals in the wrong year, right? They made the finals in 2000 at facing Shaq and Kobe in Shaq and Kobe's first title run. And it was like, they're not going to win this series. The only game they won was when Kobe missed game 3 with a sprained ankle. You look at like 94. So they lose the conference finals twice when Jordan is playing baseball. They lose both the 94 and 95 conference finals. 96. They lose in the first round because Reggie breaks his eye socket or something in the last game of the regular season, barely plays in the playoffs. 97, they don't even make the playoffs because I think they all hated Larry Brown and wanted him out. And then 98 is this season, which may have, by the numbers, was the best of all these Pacer teams, and they run into the Bulls and barely lose. 99 is the weird lockout year where they're the number 1 seed and they lose to the Knicks in the conference finals. They just had this weird up and down. And it feels like they fight. And that's part of what, when you talk to them, I think part of what breaks their heart about this game is we had those chances to get to the finals when Michael was not there. We lost to the Knicks in 94. We lost to the Magic in 95. We couldn't take advantage. And here we were back at it. Everyone was in their primes. We were a really good team and we didn't do it. And then we did get back. They're very proud that they got back. They all mentioned, every one of them was like, we did get back 2 years later. It was just like, it was too late. And the team they were facing in the finals was too good and too young and had Shaq. And like, there's just nothing you could do with prime Shaq. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, prime Shaq was like, forget about it. You got no shot.
Yeah, that's just what happens. I mean, it feels unfair when it's you, but I mean, think of those early Milwaukee Bucks teams that were really good. And
80s Bucks?
Have nothing to show for it. I always think those Sixers teams are pretty underrated, but they got that one title in an epic year in 82-83. I actually think that team for 1 year should be mentioned as one of the all-time great teams. But it just isn't. Yeah, it doesn't get mentioned because it was their 1 year and it's surrounded by all that other Lakers and Celtics stuff. So what are you going to do and say, hey, actually the Sixers are the team of the 80s? You're going to sound like an idiot because you'd be wrong. But they had that great year. Whether it's Nowitzki and Nash, it didn't work. So there's these teams that are, you go, hey, you know what was really good? Like that was a really good team. Even that Orlando team. Now granted, it was such a short window because Shaq was gone, but to have Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott, and Penny, and Horace, and Shaq as your starting 5, that's because whenever I go back and watch these, one of the things Bill and I talk about, and I'll go, the crazy thing is how top-loaded some of the best teams are now. When you think of the second, third, fourth options compared to the second, third, fourth options of some of these teams that are even in the finals, talent-wise, it doesn't even see comparable. But that Orlando team is incredibly deep, and I don't know if they would have won a ring. Like, it's very simple to go, oh, they would have won some rings. Or Oklahoma City when they lost to Miami in the finals when everybody was young before Harden was gone. They're likely probably going to figure some things out because the three of those guys are so young and so good. But the Pacers, we can do the Joe Frazier thing all we want, saying born at the wrong time. But it feels like there's always these second and third level teams that were like, oh, that's right. Like, remember how good they were, but they just lost in the second round because they were going up against one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, they just had a bunch of, like, those two conference finals in 94 and 95, both of which have epic Knicks series. I love the Knicks-Pacers series of the mid-90s, the epic series. They just had some missed opportunities, and then to, like, weirdly miss the playoffs in 1 year in the middle of all this is also a little bit strange. So just one thing on Reggie. So among the people that I interviewed, I don't think he made the cut, was Dickie Simpkins, long forgotten Dickie Simpkins, deep Chicago bench player. He gets thrown into this game 7 for 90 seconds in the fourth quarter because Rodman has 5 fouls and Longley maybe has 5 fouls. So out comes Dickie Simpkins. So I was like, I got to interview this dude because imagine being Dickie Simpkins and like, all right, man, you got to go in. It's game 7. Like, we need 90 good seconds out of you. You haven't played hardly at all. So I interview him, and he tells me, go back and watch that Reggie buzzer beater from game 4. And Dickie knows Michael well. Dickie and Michael are buddies, I think. And Reggie pushes off Michael. And Dickie was like, Michael was so furious because he thought Reggie had gotten away with a cheap shot. And then he went one step further. He was like, go look at Michael's comeback from baseball. First game Michael played was against Indiana, and the Pacers won that game. Reggie was yapping a lot, and I think there's actually like legit real animosity between Reggie Miller and Michael Jordan to the point like Reggie was the only Pacer player who would not talk to me for the story. I don't know why. It was never made clear to me. I tried multiple times. I was told no multiple times. And I'm surprised he's actually in The Last Dance. And Dickie Simpkins was like, Michael never forgot that he lost his first comeback game to Reggie Miller and the Pacers, and that shove really infuriated him. I think there was like a cool, fun, not like basketball hostility, but we'll be boys off the court when we see each other. Like, legit, I actually don't like you as a human being between Michael and Reggie.
Well, none of that would be surprising if that's anything that we've learned throughout this whole thing. And Karl Malone wouldn't do it. He's like, why would I do it? I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about how great some other dude is that I lost to. And, no sane person would ever say Karl Malone's better than Michael Jordan. But I don't think we forget it, but I guess the best way to put it would be we're often reminded of how competitive these guys are. That's like, I don't want to go on and have to sit and talk in front of a camera for a couple hours applauding the greatness of this guy that I couldn't beat because I'm never going to accept that I wasn't good enough. I'm just going to say some things went the wrong way. And the Jazz have plenty of cases for that. When you dig through those series, you go, God, make some free throws, guys. Or like these last few possessions. That's what I think is the craziest part about revisiting the Jordan thing is how close other teams were so many times of thinking they were going to finally be the team that does it to them, and none of them do. That doesn't happen. Usually the ball will bounce a couple ways here or there. You go, oh, that's one that, it didn't work out for us. And it works out for none of those teams. And when I've heard people bring this up, some people have brought up like, oh, the Pacers, they had them. They had a lead. They had this fourth quarter thing. The rebounding thing disqualifies any talk of lucky bounces going against them. It does. There's any Pacers fan that has thought of this game 20 years later thinking, we were so close, a bounce this way, a bounce. No, you're not allowed to do it. You just aren't. When you get smoked like that on the glass, you can't sit there and say that it was just an unlucky outcome.
You can sit back like you and I did and watch all the rebounds. Some of them are for sure going to be little random bounces, but every team gets little random bounces like
Absolutely.
that. The ball caroms this way and that way. There are 10 box outs in this game that are very basic. If you execute a box out and you're a little bit tougher, you win the game. And the Bulls were just tougher in this game. And honestly, you watch that 98 finals against Utah, that's an ugly finals, and the Bulls win it because they're a little bit tougher. The Bulls win game 4 to go up 3-1 in that series, in part because in the last 3 minutes of the game, Dennis Rodman just outworked and out-toughed Karl Malone for 2 offensive rebounds and goes 4 from 4 at the line when he gets fouled trying to get these offensive rebounds, which is like Dennis Rodman going 4-4 at the line in crunch time in 1998 is like, I mean, I think I was more likely statistically to go 4 or 4 from the line in crunch time. They were just tougher. This was a team that knew it was over for them. They were old, they were banged up, and they just were straight up tougher than the teams they were facing. And like, I totally agree with you. There's just, the Pacers probably should have won this game, and they're 5 or 6 to 8 or whatever tough plays away from winning the game. That's on them.
And Rodman wasn't exactly like having one of those virtuoso rebounding performances either. I mean, he only has, I think, 6 rebounds in this game. Yeah, 6 rebounds.
Rodman was a non-factor in this game. 5 fouls, 6 rebounds, 2 points. Like, the Bulls win the game not only because of their toughness and all this stuff we're talking about. 32 combined for Kukoc and Kerr on 6 of 9 from 3 is the other swing factor. And every game's going to have guys like this that sort of outperform by a little bit.
What I always remember, though, is just in these moments, and it is led by that Jordan, Pippen, Phil Jackson thing, the amount of respect I have for Phil for getting guys that are absolute superstars to play like they're a walk-on at a D3 school. And they consistently take these teams out, not just because of the shots that Jordan makes over this decade, but because they get to a level of defense that's just a little bit more effort than you're going to give. And whether it's that the discipline of paying attention to the ball but not losing your man, so you're going to be able to jump passing lanes a little bit better. You're going to get up, you're going to deflect. I mean, Mark Jackson has an entry pass. He just can't get it to Smits, and Harper is playing off. Harper's like mixing up the way he wants to defend it, and Harper gets his hands up, and it's a devastating turnover because it's in one of those spots.
It seals the game. Every entry pass in this game, watching the Pacers try to throw an entry pass with Pippen or Harper guarding the ball, guarding the passer, and like Rodman fronting and spinning around in the post. It makes me sweat watching it. Every entry pass is like, it's like trying to freaking shoot the apple off somebody's head with a bow and arrow. It's like you're threading a needle, literally almost. Let's talk a couple more things before. I love the point you just made about how at the time it felt like the Bulls were just unbeatable. But then you go through their playoff runs, okay? 91, they destroy everyone, and they have a bunch of overmatched opponents, including the Lakers in the finals. Fine. 92, considered probably, I would say 92 or 96 are neck and neck for the best Bulls team. I know you and Simmons have debated this on a couple of podcasts. 92, Blazers is tied 2-2. Blazers finals is tied 2-2. You go back and watch that Game 5, to your point. I don't know if you had a chance to do that. Did you do a rewatch? You did a rewatchables in that series, or no?
They did that one without me on the board, but I've watched it. Yeah.
Game 5 in Portland, and it's 2-2. Scotty and Michael come out, and they're just like, we are destroying this team. Destroying them. They are not going we're breaking up fast breaks. We're smothering Drexler. We're smothering Porter. They combine for 70 points. They look like what the Heat were envisioning when they got Wade and LeBron together. They're just on another level in that game. 93, Phoenix is like, one of 6 things goes right for Phoenix in the last 90 seconds of Game 6, and they have Game 7 at home. And all 6 things go wrong, or the Bulls do it right on all 6 things. 96, they destroy everybody. 97, it's 2-2 in the finals in 97. And then 98 is what we're talking about in this game. And 93, is the Knicks in the Charles Smith game. I forgot about that. I skipped right over that series. There are moments where the Bulls are, if not on the ropes, on the verge of being on the ropes. And in this game, they were really, truly on the ropes. But 2-2 against Portland, almost Game 7 against Phoenix, 2-0 down against the Knicks. That's the Atlantic City series. There are moments of semi-vulnerability that for some reason it doesn't feel that way when you discuss the team. They feel like they were unbeatable.
I don't know this. I'm kind of almost putting you on the spot here. It'd be worth, so maybe I shouldn't do it. I hate when radio guys would stop by and be like, but I wonder what their record is in Game 5 in all of these, because my guess would be that's just like this series. This is a Pacers team that's a top 5 offensive team, top 5 defensive team. When we're talking not points, we're talking efficiency. Okay, so this is when you're top 5 in both those categories, it means you're a really good basketball team. And Bulls get the first 2. I always feel the rules of desperation, the laws of desperation apply in these series where if a team that's still pretty good, it's like when you're down 2-0, you're just going to play harder than the team that's up 2-0. There's just nothing. It's science. There's nothing you can do about it. And they get it even, and then guess who wins Game 5? Chicago wins Game 5 to be like, hey, we're actually still going to beat you guys, and we're better. And it's this great Game 6. It's a great finishing game. There's some weird stats about how in this series, like the Pacers were closing much better in the fourth quarters than the Bulls were. And then it's like, all right, now we're back to Game 7, and there's this level that you're just not aware of. Like, you're not aware of what this level is. And that's the theme throughout the entire decade, where it just felt like, even when because you're right, like, it's not like the Warriors run where it felt like they were just blasting through everybody. It's not, as we mentioned, that Sixers team, the faux team. And the Celtics had their moments with the Pistons, and then that doesn't work out. Houston getting in LA's way in 86, which was weird. But the part about the Bulls that I think is kind of funny in comparison to the dominance thing is you're right. Like, there's these series going, wait, is it going to happen? There's way more of those opportunities of could this actually happen, and then them not letting it happen, which is not as dominant, but maybe more impressive that they can be tested and pass the test as often as they did.
I guess the right way to sort of balance it out is very often there was only one of those games or one of those moments in 4 series, right? So like we're sitting here talking about all these vulnerabilities, but then you look, 91, they're 15-2 in the playoffs. 96, they're 15-3. 97, which is an underrated team, 69 wins, I believe, that year. They're 15-4. So yeah, 97, they're 2-2 against Utah. That's a vulnerable moment. That's the only vulnerable moment. But like, so if there's one per playoff run or one, or 4.5 and 6 playoff runs, they win all 4.5 of them. But so there are real ones, but there's just like, they're not like over multiple series, because they were entire postseasons when they were totally dominant. By the way, if you're bored one day, I'm talking to listeners, go watch that Game 5 against Portland in 92. Because in my head, that was a more lopsided finals than it was. In my head, it was like 3-1, and the Bulls were sort of like the Sonics. Kind of
like the Sonics one, right? Yeah. Like where Peyton goes, oh, we started to figure them out. We just didn't have enough time. You're like,
yeah. The Portland one wasn't like that. The Portland one was Game 5 on the road, and Scotty and Mike, it's one of their finest games together. They come out and like, Terry Porter's picking up his dribble at half court because he's like, I don't know what to do against these dudes. Drexler's throwing away fast breaks because Pippen and Jordan are pursuing him. It's crazy. Last thing on this game. Did you remember the jump ball? And I hope you know which jump ball I'm talking about. Did you remember the jump ball in the fourth quarter?
No, I didn't remember it, Zach.
That is the play that I was disappointed in myself that I didn't remember. And that's the play that most of the Pacers would point to as, that's the one where, like, when I wake up in the terror sweats at night, that's the play that's the reason why. And so if people haven't seen it, it's like 6.5 minutes left in the game. 77-74 Pacers. Pacers are up 3 in Chicago. 6.5 minutes left. Nobody can score. Jordan drives right, loses the ball. Ball goes on the floor. Jordan and Rick Smits, who is, again, 10 inches taller than Michael Jordan, both grab the ball. Jump ball. 10-inch height advantage in front of the basket that Indiana's defending. Indiana, if they win that jump ball, they're coming down on offense, chance to go up 5 or 6, which at that point in that game is like 6 points or 5 points is a big deal. You think they're going to win. They don't win the jump ball. Smits fails to control the jump ball. The Bulls get it. Jordan misses a shot from the baseline. Offensive rebound, caroms to Pippen. Pippen swings it to Kerr. But here's what happens when Pippen has the ball. Travis Best and I believe Derek McKee both run to Jordan on the left wing. And Travis Best told me, without even watching the game, without even watching the clip, I remember running to Jordan because, even though it's not my guy, because it's Michael f***ing Jordan, and I thought he was open. And I got there, and I turned around, and Derek McKee was next to me. And in that moment, I thought, oh no, somebody's open. And I knew who was behind me. And I knew it was either Kerr or Kukoc. And it was Kerr. And Pippen swings the ball to Kerr. Kerr hits a 3. Game tied 77. Crowd going crazy. And I think at that moment, the Pacers were like, oh, that's the one that I had totally forgotten about that.
That really is the Mo Rivera moment. Yet Jordan doesn't have a 2004 ALCS, or he doesn't have a 2001 World Series moment. He doesn't. And I'm not I don't like when people criticize certain things. It's like, that's like criticizing Mariano Rivera because he actually blew a couple of saves in some big spots. But Jordan doesn't really have, I don't think Nick Anderson stripping him from behind when he hadn't played in a year and a half and then came back and played 17 regular season games and had the big Charlotte series in the first round. I don't think that's necessarily the same thing. And I know that there's statistical people that have argued against it, people that are just 100% immersed in the numbers. I like the numbers. I'm not 100% immersed in all of this stuff. Just don't seem to believe in the dread of just a dominant closer on the other side. Like, why have this guy come in the non-leverage innings? I get all of those things. I've been reading about it for a really long time. But I just don't think that anybody who hasn't played, unless you just refuse to accept it, but the dread that hangs over you, the tightness that you're going to feel a little bit, being like, if we can't get a couple of these other guys, that guy's waiting for us, and that's going to suck. And this is the basketball equivalent of it. And I think those moments that, like you just talked about there, where it's the mistakes are weightier because Jordan's on the other team.
And it's not even a mistake. It's like Rick Smits has bad feet and can't jump anymore. And so Michael jumps and their arms kind of collide in the air. And so Smits is unable to control the tap. And then a bunch of crazy stuff happens. And Travis Best remembering, I ran to Jordan on the left wing and I saw Derek McKee. He's right on everything. He says this without looking back. And I thought, oh no. That's how he said on the, oh no. And Antonio Davis again, having not watched the game in 22 years, was like, Zach, I want you to bring up the game. I was like, okay. Bring up the jump ball. I was, okay. He said, I'm standing behind Rick, right? And I said, yeah, you're standing behind Rick. And he said, I want you to tell me if the TV cameras pick this up. Do I look over to the bench with a confused look on my face? Because it's right in front of Indiana's bench. Do I look over to the bench with a confused look on my face? And damn well, sure enough, the cameras zoom in on Antonio Davis, and he has the funniest confused look on his face. And he looks over to the bench.
No kidding.
Because he said, because I knew because his quote was, I knew we weren't about to win that tip. Rick never won tips. I knew we weren't going to win that tip. And B, I didn't know where they wanted me to stand, and we were all really confused, and I didn't know if they wanted me to stand further back toward the hoop for defense or come up to try and get the ball. And if you watch that jump ball, Derek McKee also looks over to the bench, like gesturing some question. Mark Jackson is on the bench and like shoots off the bench, stands up and starts yelling. Like, the Pacers are totally confused. And Antonio Davis, without checking it, remembered exactly how the play unfolded. Like, they can close their eyes and describe that jump ball to you like few things that I can actually describe in my own life. And then they lose the game.
So I have a funny story for you here. When I went to high school in Connecticut for 1 year, and it was my freshman year. And for whatever reasons or expectations there were of me, that I was supposed to be like, a decent high school basketball player, but I was only a freshman, and I was incredibly, incredibly skinny. Like, go to a specialist. Why can't this guy keep any weight on type of thing? So even if I had been on the varsity as a freshman, I wasn't going to do anything because physically it just wasn't even going to happen for me. And so a friend of mine who was a year older that was on the high school team, and he was going to be the best player in the high school. He was a really good player, big, like good small forward, power forward type. This is before AAU. Like, AAU's been around a long time, but it's not the version of AAU that we understand today. And so the season's over. It's spring AAU, and I don't even know if we're calling it AAU at the time, but there's a pretty legendary high school coach from a neighboring town, because my town was pretty small, and this guy was like a stud coach, had a son who was going to be really good, was already like getting letters from Syracuse or something when he was like in 8th grade. So my friend's like, hey, you know what? The season didn't really work out for it. He's like, let's go try out for this team. And I'm like, man, I'm not going to make this team. Like, this is kids from all over, like the state of Connecticut had like split it in half, like two different parts of it. And I'm like, if any kids from Hartford show up, like they're going to think I'm the manager. Like, I'm not making the team. And he's like, no, he goes, I think it's going to be outside of Hartford. And then he's like, I think there's like a Southern Connecticut one that we'll play against them or whatever. So I go out, I bust my ass. And not only do I make the team, I end up starting like a handful of the games in the beginning of this spring season. And I can already see the older guys that are far more physically developed than I am are like, why is Russillo starting? Like, give me a break. Yeah, he hustles, he shoot a little bit, brings the ball up, but this is a joke. And it did lead to one game where I get in and I'm just getting smoked. Like I can't, I'm like, my God, this is worse than usual. I can't stay with this guy. And I get benched, and by the way, I never get back to the game. And then there was a point in the season where the coach, it was one of the most depressing things that's ever happened. He pulled me aside. He like engulfs my entire body while the game happens. He subs me out. He goes, hey, you're just not ready. I love you, but you're just not ready. Like, you can't be on this team anymore. Like I tried. He's like, I wanted you to start because I wanted to prove a point, but like, you're just not good enough and you're just too small. You're just not strong. And I love you. And I was like, all right, I'm about to go ball in the car on the way home. But the reason I'm telling you the story is that one of the games I get benched, because again, I can't defend some kid. I go back to the bench and I was like, that guy's quick. And the kid who brought me down to the tryout knew everything. And this is like pre-internet. We didn't know who anybody was, but he knew everything. He was one of those guys. And that's hard to do back then. He goes, dude, that's Travis Best. He scored at Georgia Tech. And then he scored 81. I think he scored 81 and 91 because the way the story's been told, he didn't score 81 against. He would have if I stayed in the game. He would have more than 81. But the way the story's been recounted was that he had already scored 8. But I don't think that's the case. I think remember after the fact, they're like, hey, that guy that you got benched for, he got 81 in a game. But I think at that point maybe he was already going because I would have been on this team, I believe 90 spring, and then he went to Tech in 91. But he was this Western Mass legend. He won Western Mass Player of the Year like 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So every time I
he still lives outside Springfield.
Shout out 413. Yeah. The high school games, I think, at Springfield used to be so rough. This is way, way before my time. They wouldn't even let fans in. So it was almost like they were ready for quarantine basketball in the 70s, if that's what we end up having. But yes, I tried to at one point. And I hope nobody thinks like I've been accused of embellish. There's nothing to embellish. I was embarrassed as a 14-year-old kid, and I couldn't stay in front of Travis Best.
But college star and NBA player.
Well, he was ready to go, yeah. But I just remember being like, hey, that guy seems to be even better than these other guys. Like, what's this guy's story? And they're like, idiot. That's Travis Best. Like, he's not even. And the funny thing is, we played against like 3 or 4 other kids that were better than Travis Best was. But they were just dudes that were on the edges of society that were on some of these teams, these travel teams that we'd play. And like they were not built for college life. And yet that's how basketball works. There's some dudes out there that have historic, legendary games that, you know, no one ever heard from again because they couldn't get their stack together. No
matter what team sport you play, I guess it could be individual sport too. Actually, yeah, you know, if you played tennis or something. If you play it long enough or you're at a level long enough, but you're like just like us, like normal dudes, where somehow you come into contact with like a real star.
Yeah.
There are those moments where you're like, it happened to me in different sports, like that dude is just a different species of human. Like that guy, like I thought there are other guys like on my team or other opponents that I thought were really, really awesome, like all American level awesome. And then that guy comes in, you're like, that guy is just physically doing stuff where I am utterly helpless and I don't even understand how he's capable of it. And you're like, that's when you know that guy's a real athlete. And I'm just like a dude who thinks the game pretty well and is like actually quite physically limited compared to actual athletes.
I was clueless though. I mean, I had no concept of anything that was going on. He probably saw me and was like, what the hell is this? Especially then, because I was not, I did not fill out until a little bit later.
Any final thoughts on this game? Any player we didn't want to? Did you have a big Judd Bushler take you wanted to get out? Did you want to do more Scott Burrell trash talk or slander? Poor Scott Burrell but by the way, we're recording this on Thursday night before The Last Dance, so shout out to Scott Burrell for being an unlikely star of The Last Dance.
Yes, Scott Burrell. Also that year, Scott Burrell, legend at the Buckland Mall. The real ones know. Because this mall in Manchester, Connecticut had just opened up, and then the dudes from stores would roll down and be like, it's on. I don't know exactly which year, but I'd have to imagine that Scotty Burrell at that point, and he was a big two-sport guy. Like I think was he drafted by the Blue Jays? Everybody that I know that knows Scott Burrell loves Scott Burrell. So,
he's a coach now. He's a college coach, I believe, in Central Connecticut. I interviewed him. I interviewed him for this story. I don't know when or how many times he became Scotty and then Scott and then Scotty and then Scott. I actually don't know what he is now. I think he's Scott now. That's what we're supposed to call him. I don't like. Sometimes you have these guys who are just going back and forth between like Mike Jordan became Michael Jordan, but Scott, he seems to go back and forth.
Mike Jordan sounds so weird. Like it's
I
like,
love
no.
That's the night I became Michael Jordan. Oh, okay. I mean, sure. All right, Russillo, you got to go. You have an actual life to lead and many other podcasts and other vehicles in other media to do. But thank you for making a little time. I'm excited to steal one of your and Bill's ideas. Love talking about this game. Love The Last Dance. And love listening to you guys at the Ringer, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always enjoy the time, and thanks a lot for the invite, Zach. Anytime.
Stay safe out there, buddy. Ryen Russillo, everybody.